For 1,700 years, the stars remembered only silence. The weapons that once burned constellations had gone cold, buried in orbiting tombs that drifted like ancient ghosts around dead suns. The galaxy had survived itself, barely. From the ashes of that last great war, a council of species had sworn an oath: never again. Never again would the skies burn because of pride. Never again would a throne rise upon bones. Never again would humanity wake its machines. The Pax Galactica Accord was more than law, it was fear turned into structure. It was the memory of extinction reshaped into obedience. Every species, from the crystal-voiced Velex to the methane-breathing Ura, remembered what the wars had cost. Empires had vanished. Planets had cracked. Stars themselves had been rewritten into weapons. And when the last war ended, it was humanity who stood over the ruins, blooded and exhausted, holding the banner of peace as if daring the galaxy to refuse that no one had expected humanity to survive. They were a young race, fragile and reckless, yet when the universe's oldest powers tore each other apart, it was the humans who refused to die. They burned their oceans for fuel, turned their moons into fortresses, and weaponized desperation until even the gods of the older races looked away. When the smoke cleared, humanity was no longer seen as the youngest race. They were seen as the warning. From that final day of truce rose a single figure, neither saint nor tyrant, but something both. She was called the Woman General. History remembers no name, only the title. Her face was never shown again after the treaty was signed, and yet her voice shaped 1,000 years of peace. She was the strategist who ended the blood wars. She was the one who stood before the throne of the Galactic King and demanded the peace that even stars obeyed. Her life stretched across centuries through renewal and augmentation, but age weighed heavier than any armor. She was no longer warrior nor politician, but living covenant, a reminder that the peace was born of war, and that peace, too, must be defended. To the human worlds, she was the mother of the Accord. To others, she was the warden of humanity, the keeper of the leash that held them in restraint. The Galactic King ruled from a central world, a sphere so vast that its surface curved into twilight at the edges of sight. The throne was carved from the crystal remains of collapsed quasars, a monument to power. He was called Monarch Eternal, last of the star dynasts, crowned upon a promise that unity would not fail. His empire stretched across 10,000 systems and touched 1,000,000 worlds. And yet, under the luminous sprawl of his dominion, something hollow stirred. For centuries, the Council of Species met beneath the shimmering banners of peace. Rituals replaced governance. Processions replaced progress. The king sat above them, his authority ceremonial but immense, his image projected in every hall. The woman general often sat to his right, an empty chair between them, the symbolic space of the Accord. She rarely spoke. When she did, the galaxy listened, but peace has weight. Empires grow complacent beneath it. Memory fades, and comfort breeds contempt. The younger generations of alien dynasties, who had never heard the sound of human guns, began to whisper. They saw humanity not as saviors but as relics, keepers of outdated fear. Their ships were slower, their fleets smaller, their presence in the council more symbolic than strategic. The legend of human fury became a bedtime myth, and the king listened to these whispers. He was not born when the last war ended. His bloodline had inherited peace like a crown without scars. The stories of humanity were to him exaggerated, ancient, designed to preserve their privilege. His advisors spoke carefully, feeding the doubt. If the humans are as dangerous as they say, why have they been silent for so long? Why do they no longer build? Why do their fleets rest in orbit like rusted monuments? Perhaps the humans were never wrathful gods, only good storytellers. The king's doubt hardened into ambition. He began to view the Accord not as a monument to peace, but as a chain that bound the empire. He wished to rule not over harmony, but dominion. Yet every attempt to expand, every move to centralize power, met quiet resistance from her. The woman general, with calm precision, blocked his decrees. She reminded him of the old promises. She quoted the clauses written in the smoke of dying stars, and so, the tension grew. It was not open defiance, only shadowed confrontation. He would declare expansion initiatives. She would veto them under the ancient Articles of Balance. He would attempt to disband the Terran peacekeepers. She would reassemble them with a single transmission. Each move reminded him that his crown existed only because a sword had once been raised. And the galaxy watched this quiet struggle like a storm behind glass, praying the glass would hold. Outside the core, unrest simmered. The rim worlds, those distant systems that bordered the uncharted void, began to fracture. Colonies rebelled over trade restrictions. Pirate fleets, long dormant, rose again under banners of forgotten species. The Accord's influence waned at the edges where light grew thin. The Council met daily, issuing decrees that meant nothing. Humanity sent envoys to the Rim. They were not soldiers, but historians, engineers, diplomats. They repaired failing stations, offered technology, reactivated the old beacon networks. The other species watched with envy. Every act of restoration looked like dominance in disguise. Then came the incident at Lysra Prime. A human survey vessel, civilian, unarmed, was destroyed near the border of the Veth Dominion. No one claimed responsibility. Wreckage floated through empty orbit for days before the Dominion's forces arrived. The Council convened emergency sessions, but before any evidence could be found, the Veth accused humanity of espionage. The Galactic King seized the opportunity. He called for an inquiry into human activities, into their fleets, their shipyards, their silence. For the first time in centuries, humanity was placed under suspicion. The woman general appeared before the council. The transmission filled every chamber across the galaxy. Her presence was stillness wrapped in gravity. She did not argue. She simply stated that the peace would hold, as it always had, and that those seeking to break it would inherit the ashes of their own ambitions. The words were not threat but warning, yet the king heard defiance. After that day, his paranoia grew like infection. Reports were rewritten. Advisors vanished. Armies were quietly mobilized along human borders. Officially, these were peacekeeping forces. In truth, they were siege lines waiting for command. The king dreamed of an empire unified under his name alone. He saw humanity as the last obstacle, a power too respected, too untouchable. He began to imagine that her death might free him from the shadow of the past. The woman general continued her work in silence. Within her command archives lay the records of 1700 years, the treaties, compromises, reconciliations, the bloodless victories of diplomacy. She carried them as others might carry scars. She was weary, yet vigilant. She had seen too many rulers believe themselves divine. She had ended all of them. The throne hall was vast beyond measure, built for gods who had long abandoned their worshippers. Columns of light stretched into infinity, each one holding within it the names of empires consumed by time. Beneath those pillars stood two figures, one crowned by fear, the other by conviction. For a moment, the galaxy was still. Every world, every ship, every station waited in ceremonial silence as the Galactic King prepared to reaffirm the peace. His voice carried across the universe in every frequency known. He spoke of unity, of endurance, of the promise that the Accord would never fail. But his words trembled with something deeper, something corrosive. He looked at the woman general, the one whose presence alone kept the empires from tearing at each other's throats, and saw not an ally but an anchor dragging him into irrelevance. The legends that surrounded her suffocated him. She was not flesh to him but a monument, and no king rules while a monument stands taller than his throne. The galaxy watched through filtered broadcasts, seeing only what the king allowed them to see, the final ceremony of peace. They did not see the tremor in his hand. They did not hear the faint hum of the weapon beneath his robe. The woman general stood unarmed, her bearing unbent. She had come not for herself, but for the illusion of peace she had built from blood and compromise. Her purpose was duty, not survival. For 17 centuries she had served that purpose, watching one empire after another fall and rise beneath the same flag of restraint. Now she saw in the king's eyes what she had always feared, the hunger of a child who has forgotten the cost of war. History would later mark that moment as the fracture line of civilization. The king moved first. His crown, alive with neural circuitry, glowed faintly as if feeding off the hatred it had long suppressed. The weapon, a ceremonial plasma lance meant for decoration, flickered with lethal intent. It was not a soldier's weapon. It was a ruler's executioner's tool, meant for display, not use. But the energy it carried was enough to unmake a mountain. When he raised it, time seemed to collapse inward. The chamber lights dimmed, shadows deepened, and for an instant, the galaxy forgot to breathe. The last words of the accord, engraved upon the throne behind him, glowed faintly, peace by will, peace by memory. The beam fired. There was no sound, no scream, no motion. Only light, pure and absolute, swallowing the figure at the base of the throne. The energy discharged in a single pulse, searing through her armor, through the floor, through the foundations of the hall. The blast rippled outward, restrained only by the palace's shields. When the light faded, the woman general was gone. Only her insignia remained, melted into the floor, a fragment of steel marked by the insignia of Earth, a broken circle around a rising flame. For a full minute, no one moved. The guards stood frozen, unable to comprehend what had just occurred. The king lowered his weapon, staring at his own trembling hands. He had done it. He had killed the last guardian of the Accord. And in that act, he believed he had freed the galaxy. He did not yet understand that he had doomed it. The silence that followed spread like radiation. The palace's sensors recorded no sound, no communication, no reaction, only the stillness of disbelief. But in the heart of that silence, a single transmission burst outward. It was automatic, encoded deep within the woman general systems. One phrase, repeated across every spectrum, every human outpost, every forgotten relay in the dark: the Accord has ended. Across the stars, humanity received the message. On Mars, the red dust shifted as ancient bunkers opened for the first time in millennia. On Luna, the deep AI cores that had slumbered since the last war began to stir. On Earth, the oceans rippled with movement as submerged cities reactivated their shield networks. No command was given. None was needed. The code had been written by the woman general herself, a single trigger that would awaken the old defense grid should she ever fall. The king did not know this. He stood over her ashes, believing he had silenced a myth. The guards eventually knelt, uncertain whether to celebrate or flee. The advisors who had whispered fear into his mind congratulated him in hushed, trembling tones. The broadcasts resumed, the feed sanitized, the footage altered. To the public, it would appear as if the ceremony had ended in triumph. The king declared that the human envoy had accepted dissolution of the Accord. The galaxy cheered, not knowing they were cheering for their own graves. But history cannot be edited fast enough to outrun consequence. Within hours, the disappearance of the woman general's life sign was confirmed by Terran Command. The old transmission routes, dead for centuries, lit up like veins carrying fire. Every human relay station received identical instructions. Do not respond. Do not explain. Withdraw, and so humanity vanished. Ambassadors resigned without words. Trade fleets reversed course. Human colonies ceased communication. Embassies on alien worlds entered overnight, leaving behind silent halls filled with flowers that would never be seen again. The galaxy, long accustomed to human presence, suddenly felt their absence like oxygen leaving the air. The king mistook this silence for victory. He called it the renewal. He announced the end of the Accord, proclaiming a new era of unified rule under his dynasty. His speeches filled the channels once held by human voices. Statues of the woman general were dismantled. Her archives were sealed. He outlawed her image, declared her legacy a myth created to enslave. The first week passed without response. Then the second. Still nothing from Earth. The king grew confident. His advisors told him humanity had grown weak, that their ancient weapons were dust. The galaxy began to move on, comforted by the illusion of stability, but on the 43rd day, the silence broke. The first sign came from the border of the Cartha Expanse, a system that had once hosted joint human-Cartha research stations. A fleet of unknown signature appeared on the edges of their sensors, black ships without lights, without broadcasts, gliding silently through the void. They ignored hails, ignored warnings, and vanished beyond the nebula's veil. The Cartha dismissed them as pirates. 2 days later, their world was gone. No explosion. No invasion. Simply absence. The system's star dimmed by 7%, its planetary orbit disrupted. The Council sent probes. None returned. The reports never reached the king. His ministers suppressed them, fearing panic. But the rumors spread nonetheless. Whispers of human vessels seen in the dark, moving like shadows between galaxies. On the 60th day, the first confirmed message arrived, from a mining colony on Veth 12. It was short, half-corrupted, but the words were clear enough. They have awakened. The king convened an emergency council. He ordered the mobilization of the Imperial fleet. Millions of ships moved into formation around the core. He spoke to the people of unity, of courage, of defending civilization against chaos. But his eyes betrayed him. Deep inside, he recognized the truth. The silence had been a warning. Humanity's retaliation did not come with noise or spectacle. It came with precision, inevitability, and absence. Entire communication arrays went dark. Defense grids powered down without battle. Armies vanished before combat could begin. On the 72nd day, the Council of Species transmitted its last session. The feed cut mid-broadcast, replaced by a single human phrase, "Return to the Accord." No further messages were sent.